And it's actually from the book of Esther in the Bible, of all places. It talks about Mordecai, who was a leader in that time.
A leader is also a light in the darkness.
I think differently, and now I believe in myself because I'm around him, and I think even more is possible.
Welcome to Leading Lubbock, the podcast where we spotlight the voices shaping our city and beyond. Each week, we bring you inspiring stories and thought-provoking conversations with leaders who are making a difference in their communities. What makes this journey unique? Every guest is nominated by someone who's already been on the show, creating a chain of leadership that reflects the power of connection and community. Join us as we explore what it takes to lead with purpose and impact. This is Leading Lubbock. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure.
The launch of a journey. I was so honored that you agreed to sit with me today, talk about what leadership is. And honestly, when I thought of leadership and I thought of this concept, you were the first person that came to mind.
Wow.
Obviously, you lead a company, an organization that has some kind of leadership in the name.
Yes.
And not only the organization that you work for, but what you embody in your daily life as you run that company, as you influence lives around you. So I firsthand have got to witness several of those instances, and you have affected me already in the time we've had together. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And just a brief for everybody listening in, want to talk a little bit about your history and read a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
So Dr. Kathy Crockett is an executive coach and partners with organization in customized strategic planning, employee leadership development, speaking, and training. She has served as a university professor in business for over 25 years. She also served as interim president for an organization that had an unexpected crisis and worked to transition the organization to new leadership. Kathy is chair of the board for the Pure Hope Foundation and an executive board member to Park Ridge Medical Clinic in Mission Lazarus. You don't have much going on, do you?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. Just like you, Ruben.
All the
Just
free
like
time.
you.
All the free time in the world. I love it.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
thank you for taking your time out of your day
You bet.
and all the things you have going on to be here today. I love even hearing the journey that you've been on in a brief
Yes.
synopsis. So let's get into some questions because
All
I
right.
know leadership is a passion of both of ours.
For
And
sure.
so,
Let's do it.
First question to you: what does effective leadership look like? How has that perspective evolved over time?
You know, I've learned over time. I used to, early in my career, when I was a young leader, even leading myself, I found myself making really quick decisions. And I liked that because I could be decisive. Yet I've also learned over time, you mentioned kind of how that's evolved over time. I think I've slowed down just enough to get curious first. Instead of just judging something and making a decision, I've really tried to slow that roll a bit and really think about how I can be curious about a situation. Just because I might be looking at something and deciding how it looks, if I stop to say, okay, what other perspectives could be come to the table? Or what story am I telling myself that may not be true? What assumptions am I making? And so I've tried to quickly, instead of getting really quick to judgment, let's make a call, let's do something. I'm like, okay, hang on a second. Let's get curious about this. Why did this problem even pop up to begin with, much less how are we going to solve it? And what I've also learned over time through conversational intelligence and even neurochemistry stuff, I can nerd out on this, Ruben, but I've learned that if you can ask yourself questions quickly, the protect part of your brain, the cortisol that kicks in, the defense mechanisms that sometimes leaders have for good reason, but sometimes they can get us off a little bit. If I can start asking questions, it gives me more access to my creative part of my brain. I can solve more creatively. I can come not from a place of fear and judgment, but from a place of curiosity and to have more of the executive brain functioning versus the fearful part of the protectionism part of our brain functioning. And it's just been a great journey to really lean into curiosity. I feel like that's a leader's superpower, is curiosity. So I would say that was what effective leadership looks like, is when you can stay curious, yet also still be decisive. Just kind of sneak it in a little bit before you make a decision. Have you been curious enough?
I love that. I've often heard things like this, where you put something in the middle of the table, or you have a ball that you're holding between you and myself.
Yes.
And we're both looking at it. We're both looking at the same thing, but I don't see what's on your side of it. I don't know what's right here, what blemishes may be on this cup, or what the color of the ball is on your side of it. But I see it from my perspective and my vantage point. And I love that you're introducing this idea of let's turn it around. Or maybe let's take a step around and see what's on the other side of that before we cast the judgment, before we make the storylines created in our head, because I think we're all great storytellers.
For sure.
So the curiosity piece, I think, is super valuable. And I think it does give us that opportunity to, what do you see? What am I missing?
I also like to challenge my clients to get curious about themselves. Like, why is this bothering you so much? What's the deal? I mean, why is this eating your lunch? Or why is this causing stress? Why is this getting you so worked up? I get curious about that as well with my clients. Because, for example, problems you solve, dilemmas you navigate. And so if you're going to navigate things like the work-life balance, we're going to be navigating that the rest of our lives. So why are you so frustrated that you don't have enough time perhaps to do some of the things you want to do? You just have to remember, oh yeah, this is not going to get solved. This is something I'm going to navigate the rest of my life. Let me get curious about, oh, there's that frustration again. Okay, remember in this season, we're intentionally leaning in this way. That's why this has to wait. And it even helps you lead yourself, which sometimes is the hardest person to lead.
I was wondering, do you ask yourself this question as well?
I'm like, wow, why is my heart beating faster in this meeting? All of a sudden, this decision has taken a sharp left turn. And I find myself, or I might be finding myself, someone said something and I'm replaying that in my mind and I'm not saying present. And I'm like, wait, why did that get my attention?
Okay.
And I try to get curious. Why are you not in present anymore? Why did you lean out? Instead of leaning into the discussion, you kind of leaned back and you're now not having a voice in this conversation anymore. Pay attention. Your body is actually telling you things even before your consciousness does. It's really interesting to get curious about even your body, what it's telling you, the biology of it. And so that's just one piece. But I do ask myself that question, man, why is this eating my lunch? Do you ever have anything, Ruben, that sinks its teeth into you and you can't shake it?
No.
I'm like, why does this sunk its teeth into me so deeply? And why am I letting it? I do ask myself questions.
Like, how do you find the pause? And is it in the moment? And this would be just maybe a practical question. Do you do that in the moment? Or are you reflecting later? Or is maybe a combination of both?
I think it's both. And I think it depends. It's also something you navigate. Sometimes we don't always, people will probably say, oh, well, that'd be great if I had the luxury to pause in the middle of this heated conversation.
Exactly.
So you don't yet. Just the awareness of how it's affecting you. And you might be getting amped up and you don't even realize you're leaning in and your hands are even maybe more clawish on the table.
Oh, am I getting sweaty?
Yes.
What's going on?
Or your face gets flushed. Well, people can read that. Have you ever walked into a room and you could tell someone was mad before they ever even sat down? You could just feel it on them.
Feel it.
And so just being aware how you're showing up in a situation and get curious about, I wonder why they're showing up that way. Even in meetings, do you ever feel like you're like at a tennis match? You're like, ooh, watching these people interact. And maybe you could be the mediator just to ask a good question or to get curious maybe after the meeting to say, that didn't quite go like I thought it would. What could we do better next time? So again, it's curiosity can be applied to a million different things, yet I often use it for myself and for others and also for situations and decision making. So it can apply to, that's why I feel like it's an effective leader uses that as their superpower in all facets of leadership.
Yes. Man, what a quality of a leader, just to be curious.
Wouldn't you rather someone ask you the question versus assume something?
Assumption is never something that's going to be super helpful for us.
But we have to sometimes because we don't have all the information, but as much as you can double check, try to do and get curious.
Okay.
For sure.
I love that.
Ask, don't assume.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. One thing that eventually I would love to explore with you, I am a neuroscience nerd as well. So we can circle back around again.
Sure.
And we can talk about something about leadership and the neuroscience of it. So that would make me so excited.
So good.
Okay, well, love to ask you another question. Can you share some specific ways that you embody leadership in your daily life specifically? And what practices or habits do you find most effective?
I would say, I already mentioned staying curious, but also how do I do that? Well, I try to play chess, not checkers. And so I encourage even my clients to become chess players versus checkers players. So checkers, they're both great games and they both have the same pieces, the same goal. One team's playing against the other. But chess pieces, they move differently. So not all the pieces move the same. So I try to apply that in a lot of different ways, just practically. So for example, even being curious, a checkers player would be maybe assuming or moving quick. A chess player slows down and thinks more strategically. I also have people I have to think through, how do I lead my energy is playing chess versus manage my time is playing checkers. So I think practically, just day to day, I think, how can I be a chess player in this situation? What is the strategic thought process I want to have versus just kind of going through the motions? And we have policies and procedures and rhythms that we go through, yet when do we double check that those are going well? When do we make sure it hasn't become too much of checkers and we still are being strategic? I also have to think through, just because a strategy might have worked in one context, it may not in another. Or even with your kids, you have kids, I have kids. I'm like, I had a second daughter and I'm like, oh, good, a girl. I know how to do this. And then shocker,
Surprise.
they're so different. Even in parenting, I had to play more chess, not checkers. Just because it worked with my older daughter didn't mean that my younger daughter had the same personality or the same love language or the same motivations. And so I think the idea around this idea of trying to be a chess player when a lot of different areas of your life is a practical way, I stay curious, I'm thoughtful about how to stay effective and those types of things.
Do you know the time length between a checkers game and a chess game? I would love to know.
I'm guessing, well, it depends if it's the chess masters, right?
Sure.
And we get faster the better we get.
Exactly.
But I would think that chess would be longer. It just takes a little more time to think about it. And in checkers, you just kind of move around. But chess, you're like, wait, I have to remember. Wait, I have to stop and remember. Wait, what does this player do again? And what worked before? And
what do their players do on the other side? Right? What do they have still left on the table?
Oh, yeah. It's very strategic minded. I like to encourage clients and leaders to try to think, for example, can we do something fun here real quick?
Let's
okay,
do
raise
it.
your hand. Okay. Can you raise it higher?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that wasn't hard, was it?
Whoa, okay.
Checkers, chess.
Yeah.
What is a way that you can elevate your strategic thinking to grow and develop? Again, get curious one more step. Okay, this worked last time, yet has anything changed since last time? I'll often ask my clients this, has anything like this happened before and how did you handle it before? And they'll kind of lay out a scenario. They're like, then the big but comes, right? But that was 2 years ago and it seems like it's different now. And so just that awareness. And so if you can catch yourself and say, okay, how could I play chess here? It also is a way to get curious. That's a good question to maybe even ask yourself. Say, is there anything I can do a little bit more strategically just to lean in just a little bit more? And there may not be yet. And checkers isn't a bad game. You're still successful. It's still getting stuff done. It's not that it's bad or villainized or anything. Yet some cases you do, especially as you get more and more responsibility, as you take on more projects, as you might have to run a little faster in some seasons than others. You want to remind yourself, okay, what would a chess player do here versus a checkers player?
Man,
can I give one practical example?
Yes, please.
Okay, so a checkers move for a leader is that you have one employee who keeps doing something that's outside of policy and just isn't following the rules, or they're just not following the culture. Something's up with this one person. So the leader calls a team meeting, and explains it all again to the entire team instead of having a one-on-one conversation with this person. And I actually had a professor did this. She was in a graduate program years ago. And she said, the professor came in and just chewed all of us out that we didn't work hard on the group project. We're probably going to fail. If you're smart, you'll drop the class. And she said, so we all dropped. And the professor came to us and says, why did y'all drop? And she goes, well, you told us that we all did a bad job. He goes, well, not y'all. Y'all are A students. They didn't know. Instead of just talking to the handful of students directly. And you know who didn't drop? Those students. They assumed he was talking about somebody else.
Yeah.
And leaders often, and not that that's a bad move, sometimes that could be appropriate. Yet why would you make your rock star sit through a meeting like that when they could have a much more direct, helpful conversation? Not only, hey, you're off here, but help them improve, versus just, hey, just a reminder, we need to follow policy. Now, granted, if it was everyone or if it was multiple people, but if it's really just one, I see it over and over again. And why do leaders do that? Well, it's more comfortable. It's not quite in your face. You might think that's efficient, yet is it effective?
Yeah.
And so that's an example of a chess move would be having a one-on-one conversation. Yeah. The checkers move is, let's just put it in our team meeting that we have every Tuesday, and I'm just going to announce it to everybody instead of, and it's hard. Now, granted, and again, I would love the luxury to have an extra hour every week to, and so I get time makes that very difficult. That's why it's a chess move, not a checkers move.
Chess, you're thinking so much further down the line. Right. I mean, we're like 3 or 4 moves.
Exactly.
Checkers, in my experience, has been what are they going to do in response, right? Cause and effect. So
just think through what's checkers in your policies, what's checkers in are there anything you can do to maybe, because think your clients want customized services. sometimes you do have standard services, but often you do special things. And so anyway, it's just fun to think about in lots of different ways.
Great analogy. Man, thank you so much for that. So now, Kathy, I would love to know what's a pivotal moment in your career or your life who has shaped who you are today? That could be professional. It could be general.
Sure.
Man, I'm sure there's things that have come up.
So many things, but specific to leadership, I would say getting to teach at LCU for many years was definitely a part. And through that, I was the director of the Masters in Leadership program, which was a wonderful experience that led to a wonderful opportunity with the Townsend Leadership Coaching Program. And it was a year-long experience where I spent a day with 12 executives and Dr. Townsend, and he would take us through different leadership type activities and learning and strategy. And we all would bring our biggest challenge or opportunity to the table, and we'd serve as a board of directors for each other. So I learned a lot about strategic thinking from all these executives. Yet Dr. Townsend, who was a clinical psychologist, he also made sure that we understood the humanity of leadership. We understood that you are still a human being. You're not a machine. You're not a robot. Even though as a compliment, people would even say, man, he's a machine. She's a machine. He said, you're not a machine. How are you taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, all the things, trying to think through mentally. And he really had us consider, what does it mean to be a human being and an excellent leader? And through that program, I thought Lubbock needs this. And so instead of driving back and forth or flying back and forth to Dallas, I was like, how could we create this in Lubbock, which has led to other things in my work that I do today with our Lead Well programs. So I would say that was very pivotal for me, not only in my growth and development, to pause for a second and say, you know what? I am operating like a machine. I'm not paying attention to when I'm tired. You know what leaders do? You just like, well, who cares if you're tired? You got to get her done. Grit. I don't care what's happening. You grit it out. Which is good old West Texas coaches in my head, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And it's not
We're good at that.
It's not that grit's bad. I think you do need grit. Yet I do think there's a shadow side to some of that. That if companies, the only way a company can function is that all of their good people have to run themselves in the ground to do it. I just think there's a better way. There's a chess way.
Yes.
Checkers might be assuming and buying into that you don't have a choice, but leaders do have a choice. And it's about, you hear this famous thing, work smarter, not harder. Yet working smarter takes energy. And if you aren't being wise about your energy and that you are a human being and having realistic expectations of you and your people, I saw that going sideways. And Townsend did too with some of these executives. He's like, look, you got to figure this out because we're building a life, not a living, right? You want a life. There's more than just making the living. You want to make sure you're creating a life that you want versus looking up years later and you don't have a relationship with your kids because you gave it all at the office, or you gave it all to your family in the office, but you ignored your health and all of a sudden life ends, So he really challenged us to consider you are a human being, which led to me thinking, who's taking care of the leaders? What are we doing to these leaders? They're taking care of everyone else, but whose role is it to take care of the leaders? Which again, has really motivated me to want to do the work that I do today. So that was a very pivotal time for me.
It sounds like it. I would say it's success and how we maybe even measure success. I think we can get caught up in the grit and caught up in the one step ahead. And I did that last year. So this year I'm going to do this. And our metrics become so hyper focused. It's almost that ball again. We were talking about like, this is the part of it I'm looking at, but I'm ignoring the other half.
And it's easy to ignore the other half because metrics are yelling at you. Deadlines are yelling at you at work, but is your 3-year-old yelling at you, hey, I want some time?
Yeah.
Or is that doctor's visit that you keep pushing off? Oh, I'll do my annual next year. Well, it's been 5 years and oh, great. I now have major things life is stopping now because I've ignored that. So back to that idea of important, urgent, sometimes the important things, the tyranny of the urgent steals the important. And so I think Townsend helped us recognize that too on a really high level. And so again, pivotal for me. It really shifted me. It shifted me out of, you don't ask for help. You just work hard. You just go. You just gut it out. If it's hard, that's good. Then that means you're growing. Well, it does mean you're growing, but the shadow side was extreme. And that was probably all of us. And that's probably why he created the program he did, because leaders can get into all of that. And it did shift me pretty significantly in how I saw work and pace and expectations of me and people I would lead. So it was interesting for sure.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think and you're doing it really well through Lead Well.
I hope so. You really even the word lead well took me a while to land on, because it's well not only with excellence, but be well.
Be well.
Be well while you're leading well. So we kind of just shorten it to lead well.
And then you think about be well. Wow.
If you're being an excellent leader, but you're doing it at the cost of your relationships and family, that's not well.
It's not well.
If you're excellent in other ways, but again, you're not taking care of your health. I don't know. There's just so many cool things to it. Lots of facets that I'd love to dig into.
Well, this is only the beginning.
I know.
And it's just going to be so great to see where it goes.
I know. It's so exciting.
Oh, I'm excited. So what's one lesson that you learned that you wished you knew earlier in your life? Maybe in your journey in career?
Over time, I've learned there is a difference between being kind and being nice. I read a great book, but I also just had been chewing on it for a while that kind of solidified the belief that, kindness is intentional. I even say kindness can be fierce and powerful, and there's nothing random about it. I think we have to intentionally choose to be kind versus nice. Nice is not bad. Yet in the name of being nice, maybe you won't say something to someone that they really need to hear. Or maybe you might kick a problem down the road because, maybe I'm not being nice by telling them the truth that they're not performing well. I don't want to hurt their feelings, so I'm going to be nice and not say anything. But is that really being kind to them? Because if you've noticed this deficit or this shortfall or this issue, other people probably have too. And if you don't tell them and you're their supervisor or you're their close friend, or you're someone who it is kind of your job to tell them and you don't, who's going to tell them? And they're going to continue to trip over that obstacle, that problem, that issue over and over and over again. It's going to hinder their growth and development. It could even lead to not getting to keep a job. Yet to be nice, we tend not to say some things. And I recognized that's not being kind. That is not the kind thing to do. Kind is clear. Kind is intentional. Kind is proactive. Even in the case of being nice, you might actually lie to someone. Nice, you could actually find yourself lying about something. Well, we kind of joke, what do you think about this outfit? And so that's kind of a silly thing. Yet, well, hey, how am I doing? Here's my evaluation. How am I doing this year? You did fine. When there's this glaring thing, and because it's going to take some time and you're exhausted and it's going to be emotional, it's going to hurt their feelings. And do I really want to go to the drama of that? And you just avoid it. That is not being kind. And I have found that I want to be a kind leader. For example, another example is I had a mentor do this with me. I asked them if they would be willing to speak at a conference. And they said, Kathy, I've learned a long time ago that if I already know I'm not going to be able to do it, I'm going to tell you right now. I don't want you to think that I'm not honored that you asked me or that I am just completely respect what you're doing. Sometimes people do that. They're like, well, I'll think about it. And they'll just wait a week knowing all the way they're going to say no. She goes, so the kind thing for me to tell you is that I'm actually not going to do that. Yet I really respect where you're going with that because I want to be kind to let you have time to go find someone else.
Yes.
She goes, if I already know that the answer is going to be no, I have found that that's actually the kinder thing to do, to just tell them right then versus waiting. And then they're waiting another week to fill the slot. And that was an example I thought that was very interesting. And I have found that, I do often will say, I want to think about it. And if I say that, I mean it. It's not that I'm just kicking it down the road so that you'll think that I'm, I don't want to hurt your feelings if I have to say no quickly. But that's another thing that's actually kind, respectfully, of course. But that's another example of being kind versus nice. And there is a difference. And different people have to chew on what the difference is for them. But for me, it has also shifted me in a way that it's chess. I feel like kindness is chess and nice is checkers. So that's another way that ties in.
Pulling it back together. Radical candor, right? It's saying the hard things, but also loving, right? We are actually loving
Truth
and
love.
caring for that person.
Well, and back to Dr. Townsend, another thing that he talked about was, how do people grow? If you're a leader, you're responsible for growing yourself and growing your team and growing individuals around you. Hopefully you're a mentor. He said it comes down to a simple equation. It's truth plus grace over time. And so that's kind. You don't want to be too truthful without the kindness and the grace, because you don't expect someone to change overnight. So you give them some grace, you give them some extra support, you give them some extra training, perhaps, you give them some more of your time, perhaps, to give feedback more often. But you need time. How often do leaders not say anything? Well, I'm just going to give it more time. But if you don't give any truth with the grace over time, that's not fair to them. That's actually robbing them of an opportunity that they could go somewhere else and get someone to pour into them to help them grow. So that's another crazy kind of upside down way to think about it. Yet how often do we all think, well, I'm just going to give it more time.
Yeah.
Okay, but you have to add something else to that time. to make that actually a chance that it's going to work. Sometimes they need more accountability. They need more feedback. As they're on this learning curve messing up, quickly help correct them, give them grace in it. But it takes effort. And that's the kind thing to do versus just saying, more time. It can't just be that. That's being nice.
Do we grow in comfort? Like, is that the spot where we actually grow from? Is the
and so why do we expect that they'll get better if we're not helping them get better?
Right. We lean into the uncomfortable. We lean into the
we don't
hard
want to hurt their feelings. It takes a lot of energy. But kindness is not always comfortable, but it is powerful, and it does matter. There's a difference, and it matters.
And there are times that I've been told something that I wish I would have known sooner. It was coming anyways, whether or not it was going to blow up in front of me.
Why didn't you tell me last year? Well, I know we should have. We just don't want to hurt your feelings. And That's right. So sometimes as a leader, you might have to give your people permission. Hey, I actually need that last 10% you don't want to tell me. You're going to have to tell me some things I'm not going to want to hear. Warn me. Let me sit down and brace for it. But if you're not going to tell me, how will I know? And then we're going to keep having these issues come up. So sometimes as a leader, as a staff member, you have to have the courage to say it to someone in authority, but you see stuff, they have a blind spot. So sometimes as a leader, you have to give that permission. Now, respectfully, professionally, of course. Yeah, a lot of people, well, you have this big title. Who am I to tell the leader that hey, have you thought about that meeting? Did you notice that you kind of came down kind of harsh? Who have you given permission to give you that feedback? So you can grow too. And it goes both ways. And you want to be able to. Anyway, it's just interesting. Kindness matters,
and the respect grows.
Of course,
it is a snowball.
Aren't you grateful
effect
for the people that actually had the courage to come and tell you?
Yes, I am.
So why don't we do that for other people? I mean, I get it's tricky. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right? But
that's 100% right. And we're in West Texas. We are so kind here. We are so kind, and I'm thankful for it. I am.
We're nice, but we need to
I'm
work
sorry.
on being
That's
kind.
right. That's right. We're the nice side of things.
Oh, bless her heart. Well, I know what that means.
I love that. I love the kindness is fierce, right? And that sometimes means getting into some of the hard. And
the most kind thing you could do for someone is fire them and give them somewhere else to thrive. Which you wouldn't see that you need to fire someone. I like to say part ways. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Part ways with someone doesn't always fit in the same sentence as being kind, but it could be the kindest thing you ever do for them. If this is not a fit, if this is just not working for them, to give them the opportunity to go somewhere else where they could thrive and they could succeed. And what a kind, courageous thing to do.
It is.
But it's not easy.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we could talk all day.
Oh my God.
This is all just bringing up more ideas, and there may need to be a round two. But I want to talk a little bit about this book that's sitting here on the desk that you've told me about. So I want to know, what is a book that's had a profound impact on your life, and kind of talk to me a little bit about it.
Well, for people who know me, they know, this will be interesting because Kathy reads thousands. I am a voracious reader. I love reading and learning. And I am a Christian. So the Bible, of course, informs so much of my world. Yet I also wanted to say, in addition to that book, if I had to pick one, you pinned me down.
I did, and
on
I
the
knew.
Day. Oh, it was so hard to pick.
Sifting down to the one.
So, and I've even thought of more books in our conversation today. But I would say this book, Necessary Endings, was also a big way that I turned some corners. Because growing up, again, I did grow up in New Deal and played basketball and had coaches, and actually also grew up in 4-H, so showed animals, so competitive, all the things.
I did too.
And so when you're competitive, what are you taught? You don't quit, you push through, you power through. My dad was rub some dirt on it, you're fine. I could just hear coaches yelling, I don't care, get up, running lines to get in shape, all the things, right? And so from a very early age, it's just pounded into me, do not quit, no matter what. You do not quit, no matter what. And so that's kind of a mantra that I almost wore like a badge. I don't quit. If I've committed to something, we're going to see it through, which is actually a very honorable and admirable trait to have until it's not.
Yes.
And so this book, Necessary Endings, it actually challenged that belief strongly that I had, that you never quit no matter what. He actually teases a lot of leaders about it. He's kind of funny in the book going, oh yeah, that's a real brilliant idea. So you have this, what do they call it? The sacred cow at an organization that nobody wants to acknowledge that it hasn't made a profit. This line of product has not made a profit in years, but nobody wants to touch it because it's the sacred cow. Everybody loves it. okay, yeah, just because we started that product doesn't mean we can't end that product. It's a strategic decision, a necessary ending. We sometimes will do that at our companies or with products, with services, as we're streamlining our offerings for our companies, for our profit margin, all the things with the analytics that we're looking at, the metrics. But when's the last time you've actually assessed your life and decided, you know what, this is actually not going to work. This is not what I thought it would be. Now, we're not going to flippantly break commitments. We don't want to do that. That's why I also encourage people to be slower to make commitments, kind of count the cost and be aware of what you're committing to before you do. So you want to have honor and that kind of thing. Yet, there are very strategic, wise reasons you make necessary endings, and it's not quitting. But the shadow side is it's going to say, well, don't be a quitter, don't be a quitter. And so you're not being strategic. It's like hamstringing your strategic thinking by saying it's quitting when it's not. And he has several different chapters on a lot of different things. Like this company actually made a strategic ending, and look what they did. And we all get you have to create space for new growth and all the things. You have to prune back things. So it was a challenge to me to consider what in my life actually needs a necessary ending that I'm thinking I can't do because I don't want to be considered a quitter.
Yeah.
And I've even had clients that I've worked with, and they've had to make hard decisions and shifts. They're like, they're going to think I'm a quitter. I'm like, and if they do, then what? What if that narrative does go out there? Then what? Are you really going to run yourself in the ground to keep this narrative
For
of
that
people
idea.
that aren't even in your inner circle?
That's right.
And I see it. Actually, the reason I picked this book is because I've actually recommended it to so many clients, and they've all mentioned to me, as much as I did, how much it really did help them kind of shift into a different gear in their strategic thinking. It's a very strategic book. But the biggest thing it's shifted in me first is just how I think about quitting. Quitting, I don't want to ever quit for just because it's hard, or just because I'm tired, or just because I don't feel like it. I mean, of course we power through that. Yet, there's sometimes very strategic reasons you end something, and that is not quitting. That is very different. And so I've had someone say, well, I quit. I said, you made a necessary ending. No, I quit. I said, you made a necessary ending, and let's talk about the difference.
Yeah.
And it really is interesting, even the psychology of it. It's just fascinating how it affects you. He even has a chapter where he says, okay, there's wise people, foolish people, and evil people. Because I don't know about you, but I tend to try to have the same conversation with the person over and over again. Okay, let's have the conversation again. Okay, let's have the conversation again. Oh, maybe we need to have it again. And nothing's changing.
More time.
He said, and all of us can be a foolish person and not take wise counsel. And he said, so a foolish person is someone who doesn't take wise counsel. You're not listening. You're not changing based on some feedback you've gotten. And so he said, we can all be in that. We can all be foolish people. But if you're working with someone who's a foolish person, you have to change the conversation. Yeah, we're now not talking about improving your performance. We're now shifting the conversation of, I don't know if you're going to be able to stay.
Right.
It's a different you don't stay on the hamster wheel and have the same conversation over and over. You shifted the conversation. And then he actually says, and there actually are a few evil people in the world, and you don't even want to have a conversation with them. So it's you're kind of like, So it's interesting, just his perspective. And he also is a clinical psychologist, so he does get into the psychology of why it's important to make that shift. Okay. So again, it definitely helped me, and I hope it'll help you too and others. I hope you'll love it as much as me.
I will. I know. I've been recommended the book several times, so it's time I sit down and actually read it.
Well, and the last chapter in the book is grieving the ending.
Okay.
Leaders often sometimes don't grieve and have closure, and so he's even insinuating these hard decisions that you're making, they're not going to be easy. That
we're just hanging on to back here.
Like, and so when you make the decision, then you've actually got to grieve it, because there's something you are missing from that, or else you would have already made the decision, right? If it was a hard thing that you actually had to kind of lean into making this necessary ending that's hard, there's probably something you're going to miss. And you need to grieve it and get it out of the short-term memory and get it into long-term, process it, and move forward. So you're not carrying baggage with you into the future, right?
Yes. Which
is another thing leaders do.
We're going to give a copy of this away. So this book is going out. And so we'll have you sign it, and some lucky winner is going to get to read it. And you're going to change a life. You're going to be a part of that journey. You're going to love it. I love it. Great.
That's great.
Thank you for sharing about the book. And to conclude, I want to ask probably my favorite question. And that is, how would you define leadership in a single sentence?
So hard, Ruben.
Right?
So I'm going to stick to it. All
right.
I actually really appreciate a definition one of my mentors shared years ago, and it stuck with me and it's guided me for many years. And it's actually from the book of Esther in the Bible, of all places.
Really?
And it talks about Mordecai, who was a leader in that time. And it said people appreciated him as a leader. And this is what they said about him, that he worked for his people's good and spoke up for their welfare. And so I really have loved that definition that boils it down in just a few words to, I think, the essence of what I would hope I would want to be as a leader. The whole things of, I do want to be a chess player. I do want to be kind. I do want to speak up and work for their good, but let's define good. Good could be helping them find a different role.
That's right.
And so, but I think the depth of those words is really powerful. So they spoke up for their welfare, worked for their good, and spoke up for their welfare.
Wow.
So I love that definition of leadership.
Yeah. And isn't that an internal thing too? Right? Leading ourselves.
For
like,
sure.
Working for our good.
For sure.
Working for our welfare.
And I think
The
about
good.
that helping me inform me as a leader. And that was my mentor, Ken Jones. And so I just love to challenge leaders. Think about the influence you're having on the next generation or people around you. And so I just love that leadership is such important influence. It's such a privilege.
Okay. Well, you're doing it well. You're impacting many lives. And fortunately, I've been able to be one of those people.
Oh,
and
so
now, it just continues, right?
It does.
Thank you for your time today. Thank
You
you
bet.
for your perspective on leadership, for your perspective on your life and the things that have shaped who you are today. Because we're all on a journey, right?
It is a
this
journey.
is just like
It is a journey.
another step in that journey, and we're taking another turn. And so just knowing every turn is there for a reason, and every mile marker is just something to celebrate. So
For sure.
you've done that well. I can tell you just exude leadership, care, kindness. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, Ruben. And thanks for having this. This is going to be great for folks to get to access and learn from. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks,
All
Ruben.
right.